My name is Vanessa. I'm 33 and I run operations for a restaurant group that seats close to 3,000 people a week across 5 locations. I know how a check moves from kitchen to table the way most people know how to tie their shoes. So when my parents called after 3 years of total silence and invited me to dinner to make amends, I should have asked one question before I said yes. Who's really going to be at that table? I didn't ask. I drove 40 minutes to the Marchetti room, walked through the front doors, and found 17 members of my family already seated around a long table covered in lobster tails, Wagyu steaks, and 2 bottles of wine. They'd started pouring before I even pulled into the parking lot. My father looked up from the head of the table, smiled, and said, "What I'd spent my whole life earning. You're paying, right? You owe us that much." He thought he'd cornered me. He hadn't counted on the 2 sentences I was about to say to our waiter, or on what his own credit card was about to tell the entire family 15 minutes later. Let me back up a few weeks. Before the invitation, before the parking lot full of cars I recognized, before my father tried to hand me a bill the size of a car payment, I need to tell you who I was the morning that invitation arrived. Because that's the version of me they were counting on. And it wasn't the version I'd already become. I manage restaurants, not own them. I built my way up from bussing tables at a steakhouse in Louisville when I was 17, still smelling like fryer oil on the school bus the next morning. Hostess at 19, server at 21, floor manager at 24, regional operations director at 31. I'm not rich. I own a paid-off 2-bedroom condo, a retirement account I never touch, and exactly one indulgence: sparkling water, always sparkling, whenever I eat out. My staff thinks it's a quirk. It isn't. When you grow up covering everyone else's tab, you learn to keep your own small enough to walk away from. That morning, I was in my office reviewing a supplier contract when my phone buzzed. A notification from a group chat I'd been removed from 3 years earlier, the day I became the family's villain. Family had added me back. I stared at it for a full minute before opening it. The chat history was clean. Nothing above my mother's new message, which told me they'd either wiped it, or more likely, there had been a second version of that chat running without me the entire time. My mother's message was warm and careful, almost rehearsed. She and my father had been doing a lot of reflecting and wanted to invite me to dinner at the Marchetti room to start healing as a family. Just the 4 of us, she wrote, her, my father, me, and my sister Chloe. 30 seconds later, a second message landed, the one that should have told me everything. Family takes care of family, sweetheart. It's time we remembered that. She'd used that phrase my whole life. When I was 19 and she needed my server tips for the electric bill. When I was 23 and my father needed a co-signer for his truck. When Chloe's first apartment fell through and I quietly covered the deposit. Family takes care of family had always meant one thing in my house: Vanessa takes care of family. I noticed my mother hadn't said sorry. She hadn't said they'd been wrong. She'd said it was time to heal. Passive voice, no subject, nobody responsible. I typed back, "I'll be there," and went back to my contract, pretending my hands weren't shaking. 3 years earlier, my sister Chloe had decided to open a boutique. No business plan, no market research. Just a shop she'd seen in Savannah, with exposed brick and a candle wall, and a conviction that she could do the same thing. She was 25, had never run so much as a lemonade stand, and needed a $60,000 loan. The bank would only approve with a co-signer. That co-signer was supposed to be me. My mother called on a Sunday, my father sitting beside her, arms crossed, already annoyed before I'd answered. Chloe needed the loan. It was her dream. I had good credit and a steady job. "Just sign the papers, Vanessa." I asked to see her business plan. She didn't have one. I asked about margins, lease terms, supplier costs. She looked at me like I'd insulted her taste. My mother's voice went flat. "She's your sister. You don't need a spreadsheet to love your sister." I said no, not because I didn't love Chloe, but because I'd spent enough years in this industry watching people pour money into concepts with no foundation. And I knew exactly what $60,000 of someone else's debt looks like at a M when the shop is dark and the payments still due. My father stood up, pointed at the door, and said the sentence that closed it for 3 years: "If you won't help this family, you're not part of it." I drove home. By the next morning, I'd been removed from family. Nobody called. Nobody texted. For 3 years, I was the daughter who loved money more than her own sister. Here's the part that's hard to admit. The silence almost broke me. Not because they were right, but because I miss being needed. That's the real wound. And it took 2 years and a therapist named Dr. Ellery to name it properly. I'd been the family fixer since I was 17. First paycheck to groceries, tax refund to my mother's dental work. Quietly covering my father's transmission repair and telling him it was under warranty so he wouldn't have to accept help from his 22-year-old daughter. I'd paid for half of Chloe's wedding reception and smiled through my mother's toast about raising two strong daughters. One bill. I didn't do it because I'm generous. I did it because somewhere around 15, I'd learned the fastest way to keep peace in that house was to make sure nobody had to ask twice. So when my mother's message came through after 3 years of nothing, I felt the old reflex fire. Go fix it. Make it quiet again. But I also heard Dr. Ellery's voice. You taught them you'd always pay. That was your mistake to fix, not by paying more, but by stopping. My coworker Priya told me not to go. This has ambush written all over it, she said, and I laughed, because she'd never even met my family, and could see it clearer than I could. But I'd already decided, not because I expected an apology, but because I wanted to know whether 3 years had actually changed anything, or whether the silence had just been a longer version of the same conversation we'd always had. I set one rule for myself: one dinner, civil, no money discussed, and if it felt wrong, I'd leave before dessert. I wrote it on a sticky note and pressed it to my steering wheel the morning of. That note was still there when I pulled into the Marchetti Rooms parking lot and started counting cars. My father's truck, my mother's sedan, then my Aunt Denise's minivan, my Uncle Paul's SUV, Chloe's hatchback with the faded sticker from the boutique that had closed 8 months after it opened. 3 more cars I recognized, 2 I didn't. Just the 4 of us. My mother had ridden. I counted 11 vehicles. I sat there for 2 full minutes, engine off, reading my own sticky note. The smart thing would have been to reverse out and drive 40 minutes home to leftover soup. Instead, I got out, straightened my blouse, and walked in, because I was 33 years old and done running out of parking lots. The hostess checked her screen. Hartley party right this way. They're already seated. She said it the way hostesses say things after an hour of managing a large, demanding table. I recognized the tone. I'd worn it myself 1,000 times. She grabbed one menu and led me toward the back, and I heard them before I saw them. Laughter, clinking glasses, my Aunt Denise's unmistakable cackle. I turned the corner and saw the table, 17 chairs, everyone filled except the seat at the far end, directly across from my father. Platters of lobster tail fanned across crushed ice, a tiered stand of Wagyu sliders, a charcuterie board the size of a coffee table, and 2 bottles of wine already half empty. The hostess leaned in and murmured, "Your father put a card down to hold the reservation. We require one for parties over 12. I filed that detail the way I file every operational fact, silently and completely. His card was on file. He'd secured the table. And somehow I already knew the check wasn't meant to land on him. My mother saw me first and stood with both arms open, and the whole table turned. Applause, actual applause, like I was a returning soldier rather than the daughter they'd erased for 3 years. My father carved a Wagyu slider like it was Thanksgiving. Chloe raised her wine glass with a smile that had teeth but no warmth. 17 people, thousands of dollars of lobster and wine, and just the 4 of us. My mother had ridden. I sat down, because what else do you do when the chair's already pulled and water's being poured before your purse hits the floor? I smiled, because 15 years of front of house training gives you that exact skill. Smiling while your brain runs a full threat assessment. The small cuts started around the 2nd bottle. My aunt leaned across and said, "Must be nice running all those fancy restaurants while the rest of us clip coupons," laughing the way people laugh when they want you to know they mean it. A cousin asked if I felt guilty living so well while my parents went through a rough patch nobody had bothered mentioning to me. Chloe, without looking up from her phone, added, "She wouldn't know. She hasn't been around." Each comment landed with the precision of something rehearsed, arriving with a shared understanding. Vanessa left. Vanessa has plenty. Vanessa owes. I excused myself to the restroom around the 40-minute mark, needing 2 minutes without commentary. On the marble counter sat a phone with a case covered in sunflower stickers, screen still lit. Chloe's phone left behind. A notification banner sat at the top from a group called Dinner Plan. 3 members. Mom, Dad, Chloe. I didn't plan to look, but the message preview stopped me cold. Don't tell Vanessa. It's everyone. Once she's there with the whole family watching, she won't dare say no. I picked up the phone the way I'd pick up an invoice. That didn't add up. Not angry. Just confirming what the numbers already told me. I scrolled. Weeks of planning. My mother coordinating ARPs. My father, quieter, mostly logistics. Then the messages that turned my stomach. The bank called again Thursday. We need to figure something out before June. My father's reply. Vanessa can cover us through spring. She's got more than enough. And my mother again, 8 days earlier. It's not asking for money. It's letting her back into the family. She should be grateful we're even giving her this chance. Grateful. I set the phone back exactly where I'd found it, washed my hands, and looked at myself in the mirror. I know what you're doing. I know what this costs. And for the first time in 15 years, I am not going to pay it. I walked back to the table with the same expression I use when a health inspector shows up unannounced. Pleasant, unreadable, fully operational. I started asking casual questions I already knew the honest answers to. How's the boutique, Chloe? Oh, we closed. Market wasn't there. 8 months. My mother jumped in before the silence could settle. Chloe's exploring other options. She has so many talents. I turned to my father. How's the contracting business? Still doing commercial builds? His jaw tightened. A tell-I'd catalog since before I could drive. Between projects. Economy's been tough. I knew exactly how tough. Because I'd just read the bank called again Thursday on his wife's phone 10 minutes earlier. And because the dent in his truck was still there. And because a man who'd just ordered 2 rounds of lobster and premium wine was performing solvency-like community theater, loud, committed, and entirely unconvincing to anyone who'd seen the real thing, the pressure kept building, brick by brick, comment by comment, until Chloe cracked it wide open, 3 glasses of wine in. Relax, big sister. It's just dinner. You can afford it. I asked. Afford what? She gestured at the whole table. This? We ordered the good stuff. Since you're treating settled in a meeting I hadn't been invited to, which of course it had been. The table went quiet for 3 long seconds. My mother shot Chloe a look that said too early. My father cleared his throat. He waited until dessert, strategic to the end. Carmi brilli cracked, the second bottle upside down in the ice bucket, the whole table warm and slow with sugar and wine. He folded his hands the way he did before every serious ask of my life, looked at me not unkindly, just with the certainty of a man who believes he's being reasonable, and said it. Vanessa, you're paying, right? You owe us that much. 5 words, 17 witnesses, and not one person at that table had said sorry, or that they'd miss me for any reason beyond my credit limit. I didn't answer right away. 15 years of paying so nobody would make a scene. And here was the scene anyway. Delivered on a silver check, presenter before it even arrived. I put my napkin down, smiled, and said, let me go take care of things, and stood up. My mother exhaled. My father unfolded his hands. Every one of them thought I was about to pay. I walked to the service station, where a floor manager named Rachel was reviewing tickets beside a young server named Tomas. I kept my voice low. The volume you use in this industry when something doesn't need the dining room's attention. I'm not the host. And I won't be covering this table tonight. Please bring the full check to the gentleman at the head of the table. His card's already on file for the reservation. And split my sparkling water onto a separate check, and add 30% to it for your team. You've earned it tonight. Rachel didn't hesitate. Done. I paid my own small check on the spot, and walked back to the table, sat down, and waited with them for 10 of the most peaceful minutes of my evening. Tomas brought the leather check presenter and set it directly in front of my father. Not the center of the table, not near me. The conversation died instantly. My father stared at the folio for 2 seconds, recalculating. He picked it up with the same 2-finger flourish he'd used earlier, handed his card to Tomas without breaking eye contact with me. We're celebrating, remember? Tomas came back 4 minutes later, leaned down, and said, quietly enough to be discreet, but loud enough for a table gone dead silent to hear every word. I'm sorry, sir. The card's been declined. My father tried a second card. Declined. A third. Pulled from behind his license like a last bullet. Declined. 17 people. No forks moving. No wine pouring. Just the sound of my father's pride compressing into a wallet he couldn't close fast enough. He looked at me the way you look at a lifeboat pulling away from the ship. What did you do? I didn't do anything, Dad. Your card was declined. That's between you and your bank. You were supposed to. He stopped himself, but not fast enough. This sentence hung there, visible to everyone. My mother started crying, the performative kind, loud enough to recruit sympathy from the next table. After everything we've done for you, what did you do for me, Mom? Tell me, in front of everyone, what you've done for me in the last 3 years. Chloe slammed her hand on the table. This is so typical. My aunt reached for my arm. Your father's clearly embarrassed. Can't you just know? My father's voice dropped to something raw. Vanessa, please. We're drowning. I saw him, really saw him. The scared man behind the performance, who'd lost his business and his pride and couldn't say it out loud until his own credit card said it for him. And then he added, and you'd let us. The ache stopped right there, because even drowning, he was still reaching for my wallet instead of my hand. I stood up, not fast, not dramatic. I'm sorry you're struggling, Dad. I mean that. But this isn't asking for help. This is a trap. You didn't invite me to make amends. You invited me to make a payment. If you need real help, I will sit down with you and a financial counselor, and we'll figure out a plan. No tricks, no audience, no lobster. But I'm not paying this bill. I didn't order it. I wasn't told about it. And I don't owe it to you. I never did. I looked at my mother one last time. You always told me, family takes care of family. So why was I the only one who ever did? Then I walked out, past a young server named Tomas, who caught my receipt and said, quiet and sincere, thank you. I told him he was doing great, and I walked out into a warm parking lot, sat in my car, read my own sticky note, one dinner, then home, opened the family group chat flooding with messages I didn't read, scrolled to the bottom, and tapped leave group. The aftermath was quiet, no calls for days. A cousin named Meredith, the one family member who'd sent me a birthday text during the silence, reached out a week later. That was the most honest thing anyone's done at a family dinner in 20 years. I'm sorry I was part of it. Through her, I learned the rest in pieces over the following months. My father's contracting business had folded a year and a half before that dinner. My mother had been covering minimums on 4 credit cards with a maxed out home equity line. The house sold that summer. Chloe took a job answering phones at a dentist's office. None of it was what I wanted for them. All of it was the consequence of choices made long before I ever walked into that restaurant. And none of it was mine to fix. I called my father 6 weeks later and offered again to sit with him and a financial counselor. He hung up. I haven't called since, but the offer still stands. I learned that the most expensive thing you can buy is other people's comfort with your silence. And the night I stopped paying for it was the night I finally got rich. I stood up, not fast, not dramatic. I'm sorry you're struggling, Dad. I mean that. But this isn't asking for help. This is a trap. You didn't invite me to make amends. You invited me to make a payment. If you need real help, I will sit down with you and a financial counselor, and we'll figure out a plan. No tricks, no audience, no lobster. But I'm not paying this bill. I didn't order it. I wasn't told about it. And I don't owe it to you. I never did. I looked at my mother one last time. You always told me, family takes care of family. So why was I the only one who ever did? Then I walked out, past a young server named Tomas, who caught my receipt and said, quiet and sincere, thank you. I told him he was doing great, and I walked out into a warm parking lot, sat in my car, read my own sticky note, one dinner, then home, opened the family group chat flooding with messages I didn't read, scrolled to the bottom, and tapped leave group. The aftermath was quiet, no calls for days. A cousin named Meredith, the one family member who'd sent me a birthday text during the silence, reached out a week later. That was the most honest thing anyone's done at a family dinner in 20 years. I'm sorry I was part of it. Through her, I learned the rest in pieces over the following months. My father's contracting business had folded a year and a half before that dinner. My mother had been covering minimums on 4 credit cards with a maxed out home equity line. The house sold that summer. Chloe took a job answering. I learned that the most expensive thing you can buy is other people's comfort with your silence. And the night I stopped paying for it was the night I finally got rich. But I want to tell you what happened after. Because the story didn't actually end in that parking lot. Even though that's where I thought it would. 4 months later, Meredith texted me again, this time with a photo attached. No message. Just a picture of a for rent sign staked into the lawn of the house I grew up in. I sat with that image longer than I expected to. Not satisfaction, exactly. Something closer to grief for a version of that house that had existed only in the years before I understood what it actually cost me to live in it. I didn't respond to the photo. I saved it, and I closed my laptop. And I went to bed early that night for no reason I could explain to Priya the next day at work, 6 weeks after that. My father called from a number I didn't recognize. A new phone, I'd learn later. Since the old one had been on a family plan, he could no longer afford to keep 4 lines on. I almost didn't pick up. I did, because some habits about answering when your father calls don't dissolve just because you've finally set a boundary. His voice was smaller than I remembered it being at that table. He didn't ask for money. He asked instead if the offer I'd made that night, the financial counselor, no tricks, no audience, was still on the table. I told him it was. I gave him the name of a nonprofit credit counseling service 2 towns over. One my company actually partners with for our own early staff who get into trouble with payday loans. And I told him I'd go to the first session with him if he wanted. But I wasn't going to be the one writing checks in that room. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Okay," in a voice that didn't sound like the man who'd folded his hands at the head of that table. I don't know yet whether that's the beginning of something or just one honest sentence in an otherwise unchanged pattern. I've learned not to predict my father anymore. I just watch what he actually does. My mother never called. She posted once a long paragraph on social media about family and forgiveness and how some people choose money over blood, with no names attached, which everyone who knew us understood immediately. I didn't respond to that either. Priya asked me if it hurt, reading something like that from your own mother in public. And I told her the truth. It used to be the kind of thing that would have sent me straight into fixing mode, drafting 3 different replies and deleting all of them. This time I just closed the app and made dinner. That, more than the parking lot, more than the decline card, is the part of this whole story I'm actually proud of. Not the confrontation itself, but the quiet, boring aftermath where I simply didn't reach for my old job of managing everyone's feelings about what I'd done. Chloe reached out one more time after the rent request. I never answered. This message was different. No ask attached, just 3 lines. "I've been thinking about that dinner a lot. I think I always knew what it was and went along with it anyway because it was easier than admitting our family runs on you. I'm sorry. I don't expect anything back." I read it 3 times, the way I'd read her old messages on that bathroom counter. I didn't write back right away. I sat with it for 2 days, the way you sit with a number on a P&L that doesn't quite make sense yet, waiting to see if it changes once you've actually slept on it. On the 3rd day, I wrote back 1 line, "Thank you for saying that. I'd be open to actually getting to know you again slowly." Without an invoice attached. She hasn't tested that yet, not really. But she's asked twice now how my restaurants are doing without asking anything else alongside it. And for now, that's the whole relationship. And it's more honest than anything we had in the 15 years before it. I still see Nathan sometimes, the young waiter at the Marchetti room. Though of course, that was never his name at the actual place. And I've changed enough details here that some of you may have already guessed which restaurant chain it really was. I go back every few months, always request his section, always tip the way I tipped that night. Last time, he told me, a little sheepishly, that the story of that dinner had become something of a legend on that restaurant's floor. Staff, retold to new servers as an example of what a real regional director actually notices. I told him I hoped it also got retold as an example of what a 19-year-old kid running a 16 top alone with Grace looks like, because that's the part of that night I'm proudest to have witnessed. Not the part where anyone lost. I don't know how the rest of it ends. My father's still in counseling, as far as I know. My mother still hasn't called. Chloe is slowly, carefully, becoming someone I might actually trust again, one small honest text at a time, with no dollar figure attached to any of them. I've stopped waiting for a clean resolution, the kind where everyone apologizes properly and Thanksgiving becomes warm again, like a movie ending. Real families rarely close that neatly. And I've made peace with the fact that mine might just keep unfolding slowly, in small, honest pieces, for years. Instead of wrapping up in one satisfying scene the way that dinner almost did. What I do know is this: I haven't paid a single bill that wasn't mine since that night. Not once. And that, more than anything else in this story, is the part that actually changed my life.